So my name is Jonny. I'm a Looker partner engineer based out of London. And today what I'm going to be doing is providing an introduction to Looker. So for the first 15 minutes or so, we'll be going through a few slides which talk about what Looker is, what the key value propositions are, and how it compares to other tools in the space. Then we'll go into a live product demo where we can really go into a little bit more detail on some of those points. I also know this is the first in a kind of series of these sessions where over time we'll go even more into the detail of what makes Looker Looker. Fantastic. But for now, let me jump in with my first slide. And there's going to be a lot of information on this one page. But it's going to be particularly good as it will not only talk us through the history of how Looker came to be, but it will also give us a kind of brief history of business intelligence in general. So if we start on the left-hand side of this slide and we rewind back kind of 30 plus years in history to the advent of data reporting within businesses, where we had tools such as MicroStrategy, Business Objects, Cognos. And actually at this point, what we were trying to do with data was reasonably straightforward. The goal was to produce reports, which would mainly be printed off and then handed out around the business. And actually the architecture of these tools was also reasonably straightforward. So to start with, you'd have your data living in an underlying database, data warehouse. You would then extract that data into the memory of these tools. Then a centralized team, often the IT team, would manage the modeling, the indexing of that data, and the production of these reports. And the good thing about these tools is you could really trust all the numbers you saw within these reports because they were being centrally managed by this one team. But on the flip side, where these tools weren't very strong was in terms of self-service and agility. So if you received a report, and you wanted to actually see a slightly different number, your only choice was to go back to that central team, get them to make quite complex changes, and then wait days or weeks for your new report to arrive. And obviously over time, as data became more prevalent, as what we wanted to do with data became more widespread, that just became too big a limitation. And therefore, around the turn of the century, we got a new wave of tools. So your Tableaus, your Clicks, Power BIs, Sisenses, Data Studio to a lesser extent. These are often called data discovery tools, and they really put the end user first. So making it as easy as possible to self-serve with analytics. So to build your own dashboards, ask your own questions of the data, and even in some cases, upload your own data sets directly. And whilst this was a huge improvement in terms of self-service, actually it was at the expense of some data governance. And you can already see from this simple diagram how these tools actually encouraged people to start working in silos. You'd have the marketing team with their dashboard and their logic, the finance team with different reports, different definitions. And so you ended up with this common situation of 4 people turning up to the same meeting with different answers to the same question. And so really, when we think about why Looker came to be and where Looker positions itself in the market, it's really about combining those two elements. So combining the self-service capabilities of Wave 2, but underpinning it with very strong data governance, more similar in that respect to Wave 1. So there's 2 other points I'm going to mention on the slides before we go into the demo. The first of those is the live database connection. So we mentioned over in Wave 1 that the very first step in the architecture was to extract data into the memory of the tool. And actually for most of the technologies in Wave 2, it's exactly the same setup. You first extract that data into memory, you can then model it, cube it, aggregate it, whatever terminology you want to use, you process it into a form that is easy for analysis. Actually, in this day and age, we live in a time where we have really powerful database technologies. BigQuery, Redshift, Snowflake, analytical cloud-based databases that can make querying data, even at huge scale, very, very quick and simple. And so actually, the last thing you want to be doing is taking your data out of those tools and into the memory of a BI platform. So from day one, Looker was architectured so that the data remains in the underlying database. Looker merely sends SQL queries to that database and then returns the results. So really leveraging the power and the scale of those databases and minimizing the movement of data. Then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is going beyond BI. And what do I mean by that? Well, really, although we talked about multiple different household names, Tableau, Business Objects, Power BI, and kind of 30+ years of technology, actually all of those tools were designed to do pretty much the same thing, which is create dashboards and create reports. If I say to you, or if I just say to anyone, if I say BI, what do you think about? You'll probably think straight to a dashboard. And actually, in this day and age, when we are trying to be more data-driven than ever, we want everyone to be able to leverage data in their day-to-day jobs, that maybe isn't quite good enough. And by just focusing on dashboards and reports, we're maybe leaving out people across the business. But we're in this situation because, as I mentioned, the technologies we have are designed for dashboards, designed for reports. So if someone comes to us and says, I need to be more data driven, often the kind of first response, the first solution is to build a faster dashboard, a more real-time dashboard, a more interactive dashboard. But actually, if instead of thinking about the technology, we instead really put the person first and we thought, how can we best supply them data in order to answer their needs? And what we'd find if we did that is that there is a more broad range of solutions required. And that's not me saying, dashboards are dead, dashboards are useless, because that's certainly not true. And if we think of our CEO, our CFO, probably a dashboard covering all of their KPIs is exactly what they do want and need, especially one that's going to be interactive, especially one that's going to be real time. And also, if you think about your analysts, what they'll probably require is a self-service environment where they can ask their own questions of the data and be sure to get accurate results. And in general, traditional BI ends there. You have dashboards, you have some form of self-service exploration. But actually, if we start thinking about some of these other members of the business and what they may need, actually we'll find the possibilities go a lot further. So for example, frontline teams. So this could be salespeople out on the road, it could be people on a factory floor, pretty much anyone not sat in front of a computer screen all day. Maybe they still need to use data, but instead of going and looking at a dashboard, it's more convenient for them to have automatic insights come through via text or email or Slack when certain things change. Or for our operational teams, so people who are really going to be taking action based on the data. Can we make it as easy as possible for them to take the actions they need based on the data and insights they're seeing? And in some circumstances, can we even automate those processes for them? And certainly when we go into the demo, we'll kind of bring to life exactly what we mean here. And then finally, we live in an age of data monetization, data productization, where companies are looking to take their data and use it as a revenue stream. So play it back to their customers, their partners, their suppliers in order to generate value. And so having a tool that also allows you to create custom applications and custom portals specifically for this use case, again, is going to be very helpful. And so really, when we think about Looker, it's about going beyond BI and about opening up all these possibilities for what you can do with data. And so this is the last slide I promised before we do jump into the demo, that this really brings everything together. So starting at the bottom with that kind of centralized database, Again, Looker's not going to ingest that data. It's merely going to send SQL queries to it and return the results. The core Looker platform is then really sitting on top of that database and acting as a governance and security layer. So where you define your business logic, where you define access to the data. And then once you have that governed secured data, what you do with it can take many forms. Just as we were seeing on the last couple of slides, that can be dashboards, but that can also be many more endpoints. So I'm going to refer back to this slide at points during the demo, but I think now let's start really bringing this to life. And so a couple of quick notices before I start the demo. The first is that Looker is all browser-based, so no software to download and install. There's also a mobile app for accessing insights on the go. Secondly, today's demo is going to be based on the data of an e-commerce retailer. So you'll see lots of information on sales, products, customers, and so on. And really, we can think of the core Looker platform as being broken down into three main layers. So along the top here, we have browse, explore, and develop. And we'll walk through each of these in turn. So we'll start in browse, which is going to be the entry point for most business users, and it's where the pre-made dashboards and reports live. But we'll talk about how they differ to reports and dashboards you may have seen before. Then explore is the self-service environment, so where users can start asking and answering their own questions of the data. And finally, develop is that data governance and data security layer, which is really the beating heart of Looker, and is supplying the data for the rest of the platform and beyond. So starting in browse, and what you see here is one of those dashboards. And it's got all the charts, graphs, maps that you would expect from a tool that delivers dashboards. But then there are a few key differences. The first is that live database connection. And what that means is, as a business user, when I press this reload button in the top right-hand corner, each of these tiles is sending a SQL query back to the underlying database and then returning the most up-to-date data. And so we discussed earlier some of those benefits. You get access to real-time data. You're not ingesting data into the memory of Looker, which can become stale. You also leverage the power of the underlying database. So something like BigQuery, Redshift, Snowflake will scale incredibly well, both across sizes of data and across number of users. And finally, you also get access to the most granular level of detail. So for example, I can click in on one of these charts, and in this case, I'll see the individual row and cell level detail that corresponds to individual orders. The one caveat I'm going to add in there is, although Looker doesn't store any of the underlying data, what it certainly can do is cache results. So if I was to press that reload button again, actually what would happen is the query would go to be sent. It would first check the Looker cache. It would see I've run that only 30 seconds ago and would just return the result from the cache. So access to real-time data when you need it, but you can leverage the cache for optimized performance when it makes sense. And as you'd expect, you have a lot of flexibility to control exactly how and when Looker is caching those query results. Cool. Now let me kind of go back to this drilled down view and start talking about another one of the differences of Looker. And this is the ability to take action directly from a dashboard. So if we focus just on this top order here, and maybe the customer's reached out to us to say, I ordered this a few days ago, I was expecting it would have arrived, but it hasn't yet. Well, what I can do directly from here is click on the order ID and send a message to a colleague on Slack. And let me just zoom in so this is a little bigger for you. And what Looker's doing is it's automatically pulling out key pieces of information like the order ID, like the order status. I can then customize this message, choose a recipient, and send this on. Or similarly, I can click on the email address of the customer and directly email them a promotion. And where this perhaps starts to get even more interesting is when we bring in automation. So we can define rules and logic within Looker, for example, to say every time a user's order has been processing for more than 7 days, let's automatically send them that email, letting them know their product is on their way. And this isn't just limited to sending texts, sending emails, sending Slack messages, because really from a technological standpoint, all that's happening is Looker has a broad selection of APIs, which makes it easy to take the data and send it to whichever endpoint you want. So another example of this is on this dashboard here. So now we're looking at the performance of digital marketing campaigns. And on this chart in particular, we're looking at the profitability of different keywords on Google Ads. And if I click on one of these keywords, I could link out to Google Ads, to the platform itself, and view more information about that keyword. But actually what I can also do is directly from within Looker, pause that campaign. So if I see it's underperforming, I can pause it directly from Looker. And again, if we bring in automation, we can then set up rules that say every time profitability drops below a certain threshold, automatically pause that keyword and redirect the funds elsewhere. So Looker's starting to act as a kind of automatic bid bot for Google Ads. And again, this really is just one example. And hopefully, it started to make you think, going back to this slide, about how using Looker is about more than just building dashboards. And when we say going beyond BI and we talk about those concepts, it's exactly things like this. Being able to take data from Looker and use it in multiple different ways in multiple different locations. The other use of the API is for embedded analytics. And the architecture of Looker, with the live database connection, with the data governance layer, with the strong set of APIs, makes it a very good selection for building embedded analytics solutions. So here we're going to have a website based on the same e-commerce retailer, but as a portal for its suppliers to log in and see information about their brand's performance. So I'm going to log in here. You'll notice I'm not logging in via a Looker account. I'm logging in via a Google account. This could be any single sign-on. Now what I'm presented with is a platform which is fully being powered by Looker. So Looker's dealing with the data governance, Looker's dealing with the data security, but the front end fully customizable. So you'll see some visualizations here coming through via iframes and some pieces of information at the top, direct from an API. And if we were to click around, we'll see exactly how some of these elements interact. On this page, we'll see a more traditional Looker dashboard. On the next one here, I think we'll see something similar, but where we can very easily customize the color schemes, the formats. We can very easily change the tiles being displayed. And really here, embedded analytics is certainly not something unique to Looker. But again, because of the way it's architectured, it is designed so that embedded analytics is kind of as straightforward as it possibly can be. We certainly could talk about that for far longer than 1 hour and certainly longer than 5 minutes. But for now, I'm going to park that and come back to the core Looker platform. And now imagine that you're a business user and the insight you were looking for isn't on this dashboard. And so what we can do is actually dig into one of these and start asking our own questions. So imagine instead of orders by day and category, we actually want to know orders by day and by the age group of our customers. So I can click explore from here, and this is going to take me into that self-service layer. And now down the left-hand side, I have all the relevant data fields for me. And I just need to select and deselect these in order to run my query. So in this case, I'm going to remove product category, and I'm going to add in the age group of my customers. And once I've made that selection, I'll press the run button in the top right-hand corner. And now what's happening behind the scenes is Looker's taking those selections, turning it into a SQL query, sending that SQL query back to the database, and then returning the most up-to-date results. So really, we're taking a business user who probably knows nothing about SQL and giving them the power to query that database as if they were a SQL analyst. And now we have the query results back. As you'd expect, there's many different ways that we can first, customize this visualization. So change the type, the layout, the color scheme, the axes, and then also many different ways that we can then share this information. So as you'd expect, we can download the data, we can download the visualization, we can also save it back to a dashboard. You can share URLs with colleagues to very easily kind of share one-off results. And you can also, again, leverage Looker's APIs to take this data and send it to whichever endpoint you want. So the options on this screen now are just a subset of those which are available out of the box. So if you want to send data to, data robots for machine learning workflows, if you want to build a customer audience and then send that to Google Analytics for targeting with digital marketing, you can do that very, very quickly. We also, really want people to send data to exactly where they want to send it, not just the options that are on here. So it's definitely possible to add your own endpoints. And as you can imagine, it's just a case of taking the data from the Looker API and then configuring how that end technology is going to take that data and manipulate it. But once you've got that set up, you can add your own endpoints to this list. And so really, if we're trying to take business users and give them the power to run queries, give them the power to run their own analyses, then we need to make sure that they're always getting to consistent, accurate answers. And this really is where some BI solutions can run into issues. How can we make sure that if 10 different people are all running their own queries here, that they're always going to get to the same answer? And so how we solve this in Looker is deceptively simple. So if we go back to these fields down the left-hand side, each of them actually corresponds to one single definition within SQL. So no matter who's looking at sale price, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, no matter where we see it, if it's in the dashboard, if it's in this self-service environment, total sale price is always going to have exactly the same SQL definition when it forms these queries that Looker's creating. And in this demo, I am a developer user, so we can actually see the exact SQL that Looker's generating. And sorry, let me zoom in again here. And so what you'll see is as I'm selecting and deselecting these fields, this query is automatically updating. But crucially, each one of these, for example, total sale price, is corresponding very directly to a line of SQL. And perhaps unsurprisingly, that's being defined in this develop layer. So the data governance and data security part of Looker. And let's jump there now. And so certainly from a technological standpoint, and I know that there's a lot of people on this call who are very, very technical, this really is the good bit. This is the kind of beating heart of Looker, and really is what the whole data governance, data security is based around. And what you'll be looking at now is LookML, so Looker's own proprietary modeling language. But really, it's just acting as a complement to SQL, in that it allows you to take big blocks of SQL code, break that down into its underlying elements, and then reuse those elements again and again. So taking SQL and making it more scalable. So to give you a very specific example, these 5 or 6 lines of LookML are defining sale price throughout the whole platform. And in this case, it's pretty straightforward. There's a table in the underlying database called sale price. We're then telling Looker that it's a number and telling Looker to format it nicely as US dollars. But now imagine we wanted to change this logic. So maybe we want to remove tax from the definition of sale price. So what I'm going to do is edit directly this SQL. So anything that follows the SQL and the 2 dots is just straight SQL being written. And if I scroll up a little bit, we'll see things like timestamp difference functions, full case functions. So any of the kind of powerful functions you can use in SQL, you can leverage directly in ML too. In this case, we'll keep it simple. We'll just times by a constant. And now if I save that change and come back to my query here and refresh the page, we'll see that the definition of sale price has now been updated to reflect that change. And what's more, the definition of margin and the definition of margin percentage have also been updated. And that's because within the LookML, we see that gross margin is defined by referencing sale price and margin percentage by referencing margin. So again, taking SQL, breaking it down into these blocks, and then making it more scalable. But I suppose what's crucial here is this hasn't just updated in this one Explore self-service environment, and it hasn't just updated for me. It will have updated for everyone across the whole platform. So every single dashboard, even if we think back to our workflows here, so where we were defining profitability of keywords on Google Ads, and we were getting Looker to automate our bidding based on that profitability, you can imagine the definition of profitability stems from the definition of sale price. And so this workflow will now also be updated to reflect that change. So consistency, one source of the truth, however you want to call it, that is really the kind of key message with Looker. And LookML is how we achieve it. One thing you may have noticed if you're paying close attention is before I made that change, I went into development mode. I got this nice blue bar across the top of my screen. And actually that's because this part of Looker is all Git version controlled. So before I could make any changes to my code, I first open up my own Git branch, I make the changes locally, test them out, and then only when I'm happy with them do I commit and deploy that to production. So all the benefits of kind of working with Git right within Looker. And I see there's a hand raised. I'm not quite sure what the plan is around questions, whether we're kind of taking them as we go along or
dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. Go on then. Let's hear the question and see whether it's we can take it now.
So first, thank you about this demonstration. It's actually amazing. My question is about when you try to reuse everything on top of the Looker platform, so you may, kind of losing the ability to reuse it from the data warehouse perspective. Like you need to choose. So
yeah, fantastic question. Yeah, and so I suppose we're almost talking about, if we go back to this diagram, kind of what we should be defining on the database, data warehouse level versus what we should be defining in Looker. And I think as a general rule, anything that we're never going to want to change over time, define that in the database. So if that's data cleaning, if your definition of sale price is never going to change, keep that all at the database level. For anything where it might change over time, for anything where you need to be agile, we recommend doing that within Looker. And I think, you also touched on another point there that, if Looker's only kind of one thing that is kind of feeding off of your database, then if you define logic here, it's not reusable over there. And so really, almost what we're trying to push towards is as many of your data processes as possible actually being centralized through Looker. So anything that's currently using your BigQuery API or your database API or anything like that, actually, if we kind of reroute it through Looker, we can benefit from the centralized data governance of Looker, but still power those endpoints. That's not always going to be possible, but it is achievable. Actually, one use case I like to talk about is one of the big American banks uses Looker, but no one at their company realizes. No one logs into the front end of Looker. No one uses the dashboards or any of that. But actually behind all of their tools, all of their different dashboarding, their different CRM platforms, Looker is providing the data. So Looker is almost that silent platform behind the scenes, which is then feeding data to all the kind of customer facing things. Slightly extreme example, but hopefully gives you a feel for how you kind of can architecture Looker with your database.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And so now kind of going back to LookML, and I suppose one of the benefits of it is it is incredibly easy to pick up if you're familiar with SQL. We've already mentioned how at the end of the day, you are just writing SQL. You're then applying these kind of few LookML wrappers around the outside, but all of this is pretty straightforward. So in general, if you know SQL, you can start writing pretty good LookML within a couple of hours. What we haven't touched on so much today is around security. But this is exactly where we could also start adding in security. So whether that's row level security, so filtering out rows based on who should be seeing what, or column level or table level security. And again, it almost goes back to that question from just now, what should you be doing in your database versus what should you be doing in Looker? But really the kind of beauty of doing it in Looker is not only is it going to be very agile, but also as you're expanding out data access to many more people across your business, you can manage each one of their data accesses and not just the handful of people who will be using the database directly. I appreciate that was a lot of material that I covered in a pretty quick time. But what I'm going to do is just pause for a moment there in case there are any further questions at this point. Perfect. Please do feel free to keep raising your hand, if anything comes to mind. But the last few things I wanted to mention, one was a clarifying point. So sometimes people see this and think, if you want to use Looker, you have to know how to use LookML. That's completely not true. So typically only 1, 2, 3 people, or depending on the size of the company, a few more, will be the LookML developers. And those small handful of people will be the ones defining the logic working in the LookML. For all your other business users, they don't have access to that. They don't need to see what's going on there. They won't even have access to this SQL tab here. All they need to know is, I can select these fields down the left-hand side, I can run my queries, and it's always going to get me consistent, accurate, up-to-date answers. So again, small handful of people defining that logic, having that central source of the truth for each one of our fields, and then the rest of the business users leveraging the kind of click and select interface here. Perfect. I think in general, that was most of what I was hoping to cover in this first session. I know the plan is to go on to further sessions and start talking in a bit more detail, in particular around the LookML. So starting to provide more information about how you do actually use it and some of the more advanced things you can start to do with it. But for now, I think unless there's any other questions, we'll probably hand back to our host for today.
Thank you, Jonny. Guys, should you have any questions, even if it's Hebrew, you're welcome to contact me. I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Naturally, this lecture slides and the video will be uploaded to our website. If you're RSVP'd to this meetup event, you will be sent a notification once the data is uploaded. And we will continue to share more content about Looker, and in Q1, hopefully we'll have some content in Hebrew as well. So you'll be able to ask questions as much as you like and hopefully gain information from these sessions. Should you have any specific subject around Looker, also please feel free to contact me. Yeah, and I'll be happy to oblige. Unless there are any more questions, guys. So Jonny, I think that's it. I would like to thank you very much for taking the time to create this content for us.
Thank you, Jonny.
I'm sure everybody in Israel will appreciate this. I will make sure the content is distributed. And that's it.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Omid.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Really appreciate it.